All right, let's dive in. This meatloaf deep dive, it's got my stomach rumbling already. Expert speaker, you ready to dig into this?
Oh, absolutely. Let's get cooking.
This chef, right off the bat, I'm picking up on his passion, but it's more than that. It's like this dedication to flavor. Ground beef A&D pork sausage. That's an interesting combo.
Yeah, he's not messing around. And you could tell, right, he's really laying that foundation for a truly flavorful meatloaf. This deep dive is all about those little tweaks that make a big difference.
And he's not cutting corners either. Did you catch that double seasoning, letting those flavors really get to know each other?
It's like he's saying, good things take time. And he's right. It reminds me of what was it? Oh, yeah, those French chefs always say about building a sauce. Slow and steady. You can't rush those layers of flavor.
Okay, so time equals taste. Got it. But then he whips out this meat thermometer. He seems pretty passionate about it.
And you know what? He's not wrong. Especially with ground meat, hitting that perfect internal temperature, it's crucial. Safety first, but it also guarantees juicy results. I mean, nobody wants dry meatloaf.
Dry meatloaf is the saddest meal. Okay, so we're avoiding that. But this next part, this is where he wins me over. Sautéing those vegetables in butter. Genius.
Right. Such a small step, but it shows you he's thinking about every detail. Texture matters. Tender veggies, not crunchy ones. That's the goal here.
It's like those little details, they elevate the whole thing. Okay, speaking of elevating, let's talk sauce. This isn't your grandma's ketchup and mustard situation.
Whoa, now some grandmas have incredible sauce recipes. But yeah, this chef, he's going all out. Homemade, with a twist. Those chipotle peppers in adobo sauce, that's going to add some serious depth.
That's what I'm talking about. He's going for it, full flavor. But then he gets all nostalgic about binding agents. Breadcrumbs, cracker crumbs, even old biscuits. It's like a history lesson and a cooking show all in one.
I love that. It's those little glimpses into his past, his family traditions, that make it so relatable. You can tell this recipe comes from a place of love.
It's like we're not just learning about meatloaf, we're getting a peek into his life. Okay, but hold on to your hats, because now we're talking cheese and where it goes. This is a game changer.
All right, so Shan, the chef's assistant, she asked the question on everyone's mind, what about the cheese? And instead of that traditional swirl in the middle,
Oh, please tell me they're layering it.
they are cheese in every single bite. Genius. I can't even handle it. And then the visual. You ready for this? It's not your typical loaf pan situation. He's making a giant, savory pumpkin roll.
Okay, now that's just showing off. But I have to admit, it's pretty impressive. It's like he's turned meatloaf into a centerpiece, a showstopper.
And speaking of showstoppers, let's not forget the cooking method. Low and slow in the smoker, basting with that incredible sauce. The suspense is killing me.
I know, right? You can practically smell it through the screen. That smoky aroma, the caramelized glaze, and then the moment of truth, he takes a bite.
And his reaction, pure bliss. He's so proud of himself, and rightfully so. He even shares with his dogs. Now that's a seal of approval.
That's true love. But beyond just the deliciousness, this deep dive, it's revealing some key takeaways, wouldn't you say? It's about flavor, obviously, but also patience, taking your time.
Absolutely. And not being afraid to try new things, right? Like Shan with her cheese question. Sometimes the best ideas come from questioning the usual way of doing things.
Exactly. It's about breaking the mold a little. So if a simple ingredient swap can make such a big difference, what else can we learn from this chef's approach?
Well, look at how he uses the hickory wood. He's very specific about it, even cautions against using too much. He's learned through experience how to balance those smoky flavors.
Right. He's not just throwing ingredients around. He's considering their impact on the final dish. There's a thoughtfulness to his process.
Right. It's like he's saying, don't just follow a recipe blindly. Understand the why behind each step. And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable.
It's about empowering us to become better cooks, not just giving us a recipe to follow. Knowledge is power, especially in the kitchen.
Absolutely. And, I think there's something to be said for his confidence, too. It's contagious. He makes me want to get in the kitchen and start experimenting.
Me too. He's a great reminder that cooking should be enjoyable, right? It's about creating something delicious and having fun while you're at it.
Speaking of fun, can we talk about that pumpkin roll meatloaf again? That visual is just too good.
I know, it's burned into my brain. But it's a good reminder that presentation matters. It's about engaging all the senses, even with a humble dish like meatloaf.
Absolutely. So we've got flavor, technique, even a little culinary artistry. What else could we ask for?
Well, he did mention using a smoker, which not everyone has access to, right? But what's interesting is how he adapts.
You're talking about old Bertha, his trusty grill grate. He's resourceful. He doesn't let a lack of fancy equipment stop him.
Exactly. It's about making do with what you have, which is a valuable lesson for any cook. Okay, so we've established that this chef is a master of flavor, resourceful, and a big believer in having fun in the kitchen. But there's one more thing I noticed.
He's incredibly generous,
Yeah.
with his knowledge. It's not just a recipe. It's like he's giving you his whole playbook,
Mm.
all the tips and tricks, even those, oops, I learned that the hard way moments.
And he's not afraid to get personal either. Those stories about his family, using whatever they had on hand,
Huh.
it makes you realize food, it's about more than just the ingredients, isn't it?
It's that human connection. It's history. It's family. This deep dive, it's like taking a bite out of his life.
It's like we're right there in the kitchen with him. And speaking of which, did you catch how he interacts with his audience? It's like he's talking directly to you, cracking jokes, even sharing bites with his dogs.
He's got that natural charisma,
Yeah.
that genuine warmth that makes you want to be a part of it all.
Yeah.
And those dogs, I mean, come on, that's the best endorsement you could ask for.
Right. If it's good enough for those pups, it's good enough for me. But there's also this sense of humility, like when he spilled that sauce, it's like, hey, I'm a pro, but I make mistakes too.
Exactly. It makes him relatable. Nobody's perfect. And sometimes those little mishaps, they lead to the best discoveries. That's what I always say.
Embrace the mess. That's the motto. But okay, back to the meatloaf. One thing that really struck me was his emphasis on quality ingredients. Like he didn't skimp on the meat.
Oh, absolutely. He made a point of sourcing high-quality beef and pork, and you can tell it's that dedication to quality that makes all the difference.
It's like he's saying, if you're going to put in the effort to make something from scratch, make it the best it can be.
And that's a philosophy I can get behind. It's about respecting the food, the process, and ultimately yourself and the people you're sharing it with.
Food is love, right? And this deep dive, it's been a love letter to Meatloaf. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired.
Me too. This has been a feast for the senses. But before we get too carried away, let's make sure our listeners are taking notes. What are some key takeaways here?
Okay, good point. So Meatloaf Masterclass 101, what have we learned?
First and foremost, flavor is king. Don't be afraid to experiment. Try different combinations of meat, seasonings, sauces. Find what speaks to your taste buds.
And patience, young grasshopper. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a delicious meatloaf. Low and slow, that's the name of the game.
Absolutely. Let those flavors meld, develop, get all cozy in the oven. And speaking of developing, let's not forget about the layering. Oh, that cheese layering.
Genius, pure genius. It's like he reinvented the wheel, but with cheese, which, let's be honest, is always a good thing.
Always. And, it's a reminder that sometimes the smallest changes can make the biggest impact. Don't be afraid to get creative. Try something unexpected.
And don't forget about the presentation. Who knew meatloaf could be so visually appealing? This chef turned it into a work of art.
Presentation is key. It's about engaging all the senses, making the dining experience that much more memorable. Even for something as, well, homey as meatloaf.
It's all about elevating the everyday, right? And, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to enjoy the process. Cooking should be fun.
Exactly. It's about connecting with your food, your heritage, the people you share it with. And don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way. That's how we learn.
So embrace the mess, have fun, and don't be afraid to put your own spin on things. It's funny, isn't it? We're talking about meatloaf, but it feels like we've learned so much more than just a recipe.
It's that generosity, right?
Yeah.
He's sharing his knowledge, but also these little pieces of himself, those family stories, the way he talks about food. It's personal.
And then when he calls his dogs over to try it, my heart melted. That's a man who loves what he does.
Food, family, those furry friends. It's
Yeah.
all connected, isn't it? That's what makes this deep dive so special. It's a reminder that food brings people together.
Okay, so as we wrap things up here, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this whole meatloaf adventure?
I think it's that sense of possibility. This chef, he took something so familiar, so classic, and he made it his own. He reminded us that cooking, it's not just about following rules. It's about experimenting, having fun, finding your own voice.
It's about getting in the kitchen and making some magic,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's just a Tuesday night meatloaf.
Exactly. And you know what? Don't be afraid to mess up a little along the way.
Yeah.
Some of the best dishes were born from happy accidents.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. This deep dive, it's been a wild ride. I'm inspired, I'm hungry, and I'm ready to get cooking.
Me too. And for our listeners, we want to hear from you. What's your go-to meatloaf secret? Share those culinary masterpieces with us on social media.
Until next time. Happy cooking.